जय राधा माधव कुंज विहारी। गोपीजना वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी। यशोदानंदन व्रज जनरंजना। यमुना तीरावनचारी। यमुना तीरावनचारी। जय राधा माधव कुंज विहारी। जय गोपी जनवल्लभ गिरिवरधारी। यशोदानंदन व्रज जनरंजना। यमुना तीरावनचारी। यमुना तीरावनचारी। जय राधा माधव कुंज विहारी। जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शत श्री श्रीमद हिज डिवाइन ग्रेस एसी भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी शिल प्रभुपाद की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय। All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 14, Text 42. And verse is not written on the board because I think we've gotten used to the idea that all verses are in prose. This one is not. So, those of you who have the verse in front of you, you can repeat. Tasyedam upagayanti manasapi mahatmanaha nanuvartmarhati nirpo makshikeva garutmataha. आर्षभस्येह राजर्ष्ये मनसापि महात्मनः मनुवर्तमार्हति नृपो मक्षिकेव गरुत्मतः. मक्षिकेव गुरुत्मतः आर्षभस्येह राजर्षे मनसापि महात्मनः नानुवर्त्मार्हति नृप मक्षिकेव गुरुत्मतः Ladies, please. आर्षभस्येह राजर्षे मनसापि महात्मनः नानुवर्त्मार्हति नृप मक्षिकेव गुरुत्मतः तस्य of Jada Bharat idam this glorification upagayanti they sing Arshabhasya of the son of Rishabhadeva iha here Rajarishe of the great saintly king Manasa api even by the mind Mahatmanaha of the great personality Jadabharat na not anuvartma arhati able to follow the path nripaha any king makshika a fly eva like garutmataha of Garuda the carrier of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Having summarized the teachings of Jadabharat, Shukadeva Goswami said, My dear King Parikshit, the path indicated by Jadabharat is like the path followed by Garuda, the carrier of the Lord. And ordinary kings are just like flies. Flies cannot follow the path of Garuda. And to date, none of the great kings and victorious leaders could follow this path of devotional service, not even mentally. Could you turn down the volume? It's echoing. Thank you. Purport. As Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita 7.3, Manusyanam sahasreshu kaschit yatati siddhaye yatataamapi siddhanam kaschinmam veti tattvataha. Out of many thousands among men, one may endeavor for perfection. And of those who have achieved perfection, hardly one knows me in truth. The path of devotional service is very difficult, even for great kings who have conquered many enemies. Although these kings were victorious on the battlefield, they could not conquer the bodily conception. There are many big leaders, yogis, swamis, and so-called incarnations who are very much addicted to mental speculation, who advertise themselves as perfect personalities, but they are not ultimately successful. The path of devotional service is undoubtedly very difficult to follow, but it becomes very easy if the candidate actually wants to follow the path of the Mahajana. In this age, there is the path of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who appeared to deliver all fallen souls. This path is so simple and easy that everyone can take to it by chanting the holy name of the Lord. Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama eva kevalam, kalo nasteva, nasteva, nasteva gatiranyatha. We are very satisfied that this path is being opened by this Krishna consciousness movement, because so many European and American boys and girls are taking this philosophy seriously and gradually attaining perfection. Om Ajnanatirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chaksurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kada Mahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। The instructions of Jadabharat to Maharaj Rahugana have been explained by Shukadeva Goswami to Maharaj Parikshit in detail. The analogy of the forest of material enjoyment, because there were so many analogies. Shukadeva Goswami explained all of it in sufficient detail, and now this pastime is coming to an end. The next chapter gets into the different descendants of Maharaj Priyavrata. There were two brothers who were both sons of Swayambhuva Manu. One's name was Priyavrata, and the other's name was, what was Priyavrata's brother's name? Uttanapada. And we heard about Dhruva Maharaja, who was the son of Uttanapada, and we heard that whole pastime in 4th canto. Then Maharaj Priyavrata. And then this chapter describes the descendants of Maharaj Priyavrata. And he's concluding this section by glorifying Jadabharat. He says, Tasyedam upagayanti, that people, or people means the great sages, the learned persons, the wise sages, the glorification of Jadabharata in this way, that Arshabhasyeha Rajarshya, Arshabha means the son of Rishabha, that he was so exalted, way up there. And his teachings and the path that he followed and the example that he set is so high up there that even great saintly kings, the Rajas Rishis, could not follow his teachings or could not follow his path. Na anuvartma arhati. Krishna uses this term, vartma, means the path. Mama vartma anuvartante. Na anuvartma arhati. That they were not qualified to follow his path. Just as a fly cannot follow the path of Garuda. There's no comparison between a fly and a Garuda. And he says, even mentally they could not follow. Many times, devotional service is just performed in the mind. I mean, I'm saying it in a sarcastic way. That we sit in some place and the mind takes us into all these wonderful ways in which we will preach, the wonderful ways in which we will save the world or help someone out of their situation. It's mostly imagination. And if a simple situation comes our way and we recognize how much we've forgotten Krishna, that even the simple things can be quite daunting. But in the imaginary world, we're living a nice phantasmagoria, as they say. So even mentally, the Rajarishis could not follow such a path because it was too inconceivable. The inconceivability is that being free from the bodily conception of life is not easy. As much as one tries very hard by the cultivation of knowledge or by the cultivation of the process of yoga. Why does yoga, in the Eightfold Yoga system, the first four steps are on the physical plane: yama, niyama, asana, and pranayama. Even pratyahara, actually. They're concerned with the physical side of things. And there's rules like celibacy, eating very frugally, only as much as the body requires, and that too is not anything and everything. There are certain foods to not eat at all. Then there is asana, all these physical ways of sitting, lying down, keeping the spine strong, the shoulders, the knees, the hips, whatever. There's so many asanas. Then there is pranayama, breathing techniques. Such and such breath controls blood pressure, such and such type of breath clears, or that sound that it creates clears the mind and the body, etc. The sound vibe, there's a whole science behind it. And pratyahara is to withdraw the senses from sensual engagement. It requires practice. And there are many persons accomplished at this, very accomplished yet. And then there is the three on the mental plane: dhyana, dharana, and samadhi. Even persons who have attained samadhi in that sense, on the yogic platform, find it difficult to always be free from the bodily conception of life. And the Bhagavatam is full of stories of that persons. Durvasa Muni, Shaubhari Muni, they were all very accomplished yogis, like very accomplished. Very accomplished. Like, even that we cannot imagine. Shaubhari Muni or Chavana Muni. And they're all associates. If you read Krishna book, when Krishna travels, they're also there. Chavana Muni was meditating underground, and everything was covered. His body was underground, except two holes for his eyes. And there was an anthill on top of him. And Sukanya was daughter of a king. She came with her girlfriends and she was walking around in the garden. She saw this anthill and she looked inside. There were two holes and bright red little balls of fire or something. They were very attractive. And she wondered, what is that? So she took a little thorn and pierced those eyes. They were Chavana Muni's eyes. And they started bleeding. And his meditation got disturbed. And the king had to apologize. So he said, "Oh, I'm very sorry. Please take my daughter in marriage." And it's described Chavana Muni's body was all withered. He was very old. His teeth had fallen out. His skin was all loose. He was extremely cranky, and used to yell at Sukanya, etc., etc. And there's a whole pastime, so accomplished, but cranky. Why be cranky? Bodily conception of life. It's described till he becomes even further realized later. Our Shaubhari Muni, he was meditating underwater for hundreds of years. How did they do it? They do it. And one day he saw two fish copulating. They were engaged in sexual connection, fish. And his mind got so disturbed that he came out of his meditation, went to a particular king who had 50 daughters, and he told them, "I would like to marry one of your daughters." And the king gave a non-committal answer. He says, "The daughters are welcome to choose their own husband," or something like that. And Chaubhari Muni then got upset. And somehow the king tried to appease him, etc., etc. He married all 50 daughters. And by his mystic potency, he created this magnificent ashram. that had flowers and all these beautiful fragrances and comforts of life and etc., etc. So much so that he wanted to basically put the king to shame. That look at what I can do when you said no, see what I can do for 50 wives. And he lived a lavish, it's described, he totally forgot about his whole yogic path. And one day it dawns to him, he does a little self examination. It's like, what have I done? What have I done? I was happily going along in severe penances, and just because I saw two fish, my mind got so disturbed. And look at me, I have 50 wives, a whole household here. What is this? What is this? How far I've deviated from the path that I was going just because I saw two fish and my mind got agitated. And so he goes back to his yogic path, and this time he goes back for no return. He retires timely, as they say. Yesterday, I heard one devotee came to one of the spiritual masters and said to the spiritual master, Maharaj, I have gotten married. Do you have any advice for me? And the spiritual master said, oh, it's a bit too late now. Advice is before, not after. After, it's only how do you tolerate things. Or getting into an ashram like this, grahastha ashram, without proper advice or training prior is risky. Is risky, very risky, because the opportunities to get distracted are very high. But if one is properly trained, then one will stay in fidelity to the ultimate goal of life. So here he says, Manushyanam sahasreshu kaschit yatati siddhaye. People are not interested in perfecting their lives in general. And among those who are interested in perfecting their lives, yatatam api siddharam kaschin mam vetti tattvada. Hardly any of them knows Krishna properly or in truth. So Prabhupada validates for all of us that yes, devotional life is very difficult. Because all this time, Prabhupada says it's very easy. It's very easy. And we wonder, where is it easy? What am I doing wrong? He says, no doubt, it is very difficult. The path of devotional service is very difficult, even for great kings who have conquered many enemies. This is a message Prahlad Maharaj gives Hiranyakashipu. Yeah, you have conquered many kings. You've conquered the entire universe. All the planets, they bow down before you. The demigods who control the planets, they bow down before you. This is a significant statement because planets control the human beings. Yeah, the whole science of astrology is to understand the influence of planets on human beings' psychology. Sometimes when persons really do things that are bizarre, we wonder which planet is influencing them in the wrong way. So we say, oh, today this Prabhu's planets are not aligned. Like that. Or looks like, there is some influence because as according to their astrological chart, when certain planets move this way, that way they create severe physical and mental imbalances. They have that potency. And the demigods who controlled those influences, they were bowing down before Hiranyakashipu. And by his raising of his eyebrows, they would all shiver. Oh, Hiranyakashipu is upset. So he had that influence. He could control every entity in the universe except one, or two, or three. One is Lord Vishnu. He couldn't control him. The other was his own son. And most importantly, he couldn't control his own mind. His own senses, they were uncontrolled. So Prahlad Maharaj says, what's the use? You've controlled the entire universe, but you can't control yourself. So even for such, he's not a great king, but even for a great king, Raja Rishi, who has dedicated his life to dharma, to being saintly, even for such a person, devotional service is very difficult. Then what to speak of the common man who basically cannot get anything right? Or persons who are in drunken stupor or intoxicated by pride from material education or intoxicated by their wealth or so called assets that we have in this world. There's nothing. There's nothing when it comes to devotional life. None of these assets are actually helpful. They're not necessarily harmful either. It depends on how one uses them. When these assets are used for artha and kama, without dharma in the picture, they turn out to be the greatest banes, their punishment. A person gets so entangled and punished in his own activities because he's only looking for sense gratification and economic development. That's a very, very low base lifestyle. At least a human like lifestyle is when artha and kama are somewhere because of dharma. That the person is at least dharmic, is somewhere close to the Vedic paradigm. But someone who lives a life of dharma, that dharma understanding that it's pleasing Krishna, then that is human life. And that is a platform on which devotional life can be performed. And Prabhupada describes that it becomes very easy. The path of devotional service is undoubtedly very difficult to follow, but it becomes very easy if the candidate actually wants to follow the path of the Mahajana. To want to follow the path of Mahajana means that a life of dharma for pleasing Krishna. It's called Vipra Dharma Achyutashraya. This was Bhishma Deva's message to Yudhishthir Maharaj. That please don't lament that such a big war has been fought and so many millions of soldiers have died combined on both sides. Because Yudhishthir Maharaj was feeling all of this mayhem and blood that has been lost is simply for me to become king. It seems very selfish. I feel very terrible. So Bhishma Deva assures him, no, no, no. The reason that the war was fought was, of course, to make you the king. But more importantly, it was Krishna's desire to rid the earth of the burden of unsaintly or impious rulers and establish you as his representative. Because under your care, all of the citizens have the fullest opportunity to become Krishna conscious. Therefore, it was necessary. And as far as you're concerned, you've lived your life in such a way by these three principles all the time. Vipra Dharma Achyuta Ashraya. You've lived a theistic life. You have never transgressed dharma. In fact, Yudhishthira Maharaj was called Dharmaraja. That he always considered every situation, everything that he said and did, he always considered, is it according to religious principles or not? And it's not just sufficient to follow religious principles. When Arjuna gives arguments to Krishna on the basis of religious and moral principles, Krishna says, you're a fool. Because the religious principles are meant to be followed with a particular purpose. And that purpose is Achyuta Ashraya. It must be pleasing to Krishna. It is meant for service to Krishna. And the principles of religion facilitate that. But if one just follows religious principles without understanding what is pleasing to Krishna, one may not be pleasing Krishna. And it says the guidance of Vipras, expert Brahmanas. Without guidance, then one wouldn't know how to apply religious principles in different circumstances. It is described that in the training of persons in Krishna consciousness, there's a difference between details and principles. And when children or devotees or whoever, when we are trained in the proper principles, then it fosters maturity. Versus when the training is only into details, because details can change anytime. In fact, they do. They do change with time, they do change with the place, they do change with the persons. So it's important to understand the principle that is being applied, or the principle that needs to be invoked in any situation. If the principle is clear, then devotees we mature. So we are taught certain principles of Krishna consciousness. The whole nectar of devotion is filled with principles of bhakti. And Rupa Goswami gives a few details here and there, but he focuses simply on principles, and Prabhupada asked us to study that book thoroughly so we understand the principles. We recognize principles. Oh, in this case, this is what's happening. In this case, this is how we need to apply ourselves. So he says, this is called following the Mahajanas, taking their example. We experience pretty much the same situations as the Mahajanas. What has changed is time. It's many, perhaps thousands of years. What has changed is perhaps the context or the circumstances to some degree. And what has changed is the environment. Yet, the situations are the same. Someone insulting us, someone praising us, household issues, communal issues, issue about doing what is the right thing to do, the consequences of not knowing the right thing, the consequences of doing the wrong thing. Whether one is a child, whether one is a grown-up, one is a king, one is a householder, one is a yogi, one is a devotee, one is a very sinful person. It doesn't matter. There's always, the Bhagavatam always comes to the real dharma. Because anything else, if it is artha and kama, it has no place in Bhagavatam. So if a person goes to the Bhagavatam to find out what is it that I should do to become financially well situated, it's not there in the Bhagavatam. In fact, right in the beginning, it's rejected. If you're looking for anything other than pure devotional service, don't come here. Go away. Dharma projita karitavota. And then it says, even if you're not looking for it, if you study Bhagavatam, you will find it. You'll find pure devotional service. That is the only dharma that Bhagavatam deals with. So for us, in all circumstances, hopefully that's what we're looking for. Oh, how do I feel my relationship with Krishna? Or how do I connect to Krishna in a better way? So Bhagavatam is our only solace, is our only source. And there we learn that this is how these devotees did it. And in our lives, we might feel like the fly, and these devotees like Garuda. They're way up there. But the principle still remains. Even if we ask ourselves, can I apply? Can I even think of those devotees, uh, how they how they did it? Can I even apply an atomic fraction of it in my life? Prabhupada says when we follow the path of the Mahajana, it becomes easier. In this age, there is the path of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So he is giving us the example of the Mahajan, in this case is Lord Chaitanya, who appeared to deliver all fallen souls. This path is simple and easy that everyone can take to it by the chanting of the holy name of the Lord. Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama eva kevalam. Kalau nastyeva, nastyeva, nastyeva gatiranyata. So our acharyas describe that 3 times when something is spoken, then that should be taken as authoritative. It should be taken as conclusive. So there are 3 times the affirmation, and there are 3 times the negative of it. First time it says Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama eva kevalam. Kevalam means singularity, single but not and nothing else. That's it, only. 3 times only the chanting of the holy name. The chanting of the holy name, the chanting of the holy. And then 3 times he says Nastyeva, Nastyeva, Nastyeva. There isn't another, there isn't another, there isn't another way. So technically 6 times. 6 times. Not only 3 times affirmation, but 6 times. And this process, he says, we're very satisfied that this path is being opened by this Krishna consciousness movement. That the solution to all problems, the first and most daunting problem, is the bodily conception of life. That is it. That is the cause of all other problems. In fact, if we analyze it, the sense of pain or bodily distress, the sense of mental or emotional distress, everything is rooted in bodily conception of life. And if that bodily conception of life is addressed or removed or attempted, now ultimately it goes by Krishna's mercy, but if it attempt that by chanting of the holy name only, will that bodily conception of life be removed, or we detach from the bodily conception of life? There is no other way, there is no other way, there is no other way. It's also described that the reason it said 3 times, Nastyeva, 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 it says the first Nasti is to deny that the path of fruitive activity can help or cannot help become free from bodily conception of life. That's the first Nasti. The second Nasti is the path of mental speculation or jnana, just cultivating knowledge, also does not free one from the bodily conception of life. Because jnana is not sufficient in and of itself. And the third is the path of yoga, as we say, the Ashtanga yoga, that the siddhis in yoga, or yogic siddhis, are not sufficient to become detached from the bodily conception of life. And these 3 we see the Bhagavatam describing in many, many ways. King Puranjana and others who are so engaged in fruitive mentality, or fruitive activities, they cannot get free from the bodily conception of life. The great knowledgeable persons, they also did not get freedom from bodily conception of life until they met a devotee and began pure devotional service. Or the yogis, so many examples of yogis. That's not the way. The way is to chant the holy name of the Lord with the proper conceptions. And the conceptions are given by the Mahajanas. So it's important to appreciate, hear about, study glorify, and at the end of it, actually chant the holy name of the Lord as the only means to become free of that bodily conception of life. There is no other way. So the reason we do what we do, services, washing of pots, going out and preaching, distributing of books, doing this kind of service, managerial service, whatever service, whatever it is done for becoming more attracted to the chanting of the holy name. Whatever we're doing is to enhance that, the desire, the ability to attract Krishna's mercy so we can chant the holy name, progressively being relieved of the offenses towards the holy name, to chant, trying to free ourselves of the offenses, all the way to going to, by Krishna's grace, going to pure chanting of the holy name. Okay, any thoughts, ideas? I missed something. Okay, Bhaktalok.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
You kind of touched on this topic that I wanted to discuss towards the end, I think, discussing like the purpose of our various activities is to connect with the holy name. So if you could elaborate a little bit more on how we can recognize distractions. You mentioned for a devotee who's entering the Grihastha ashram, he may find himself unwillingly or inadvertently, kind of accidentally becoming distracted. Personally, I'm still in the brahmacharya ashram, but I also have this problem of getting distracted.
It's not just really grahasthas are distracted.
Yeah. So how can I recognize those? First of all, is it like the activity or is it the internal disposition? And then for the second, how can I recognize that it's a distraction? And then how can I rectify that?
In the beginning of 5th canto, there are teachings of Rishabdev. And there's wonderful verses that talk about this. So first of all, it's not that only grahasthas are distracted. The brahmacharis can also be very distracted. And a distracted brahmachari becomes a distracted grahastha. So it's very important to first be trained well. And it's not just activity, because we see time and again that it's not the activity, it's the internal disposition. And that internal disposition, Rishabdev talks about, because we're talking about Rishabdeva here in that context. He says, evam karma mana, evam mana karma vasham prayukte, avidyaya atmani abhidhiyamane. That the mind is filled with conceptions, varieties of them. And those conceptions, he puts them all into one category, right? He calls them fruitive mentality or bodily conception of life. And as long as it's there in the deep down crevices of our consciousness that we're not aware of. And it's not like we have to wait to become aware of them. And even if those we are aware of, when we are acting and speaking on a day-to-day basis, they come from the deep depth of that consciousness. So we're not even aware sometimes when we are saying, why we are saying and doing certain things. We're mostly impelled by those conceptions sitting way down in our consciousness, way in the depths of it. So how to get rid of them? Karma, yoga, jnana can't help because they can't touch them. So it's described that Cheto Darpana Marjanam is that's the clearing of the consciousness, that the deep-rooted conceptions that have been accumulated for lifetimes and lifetimes and added on and strengthened in this lifetime are removed, are uprooted. There's no other way. So when we hear that there is no other way, then why try another way? Right? We try. People try different things. Those things can be tried on the platform of chanting of the holy name. It's the holy name that's the solution for all of those conceptions, misconceptions to go away. And when we see that, we call this the process of anartha nivritti, as we are chanting with proper sadhu sangha and bhajana kriya. Without these two, anartha nivritti doesn't happen. When we chant, then as the conceptions are rooted out one after the other, we become, oh, there you go. I didn't realize that was going on. Oh, I realized this was going on. And as long as those conceptions aren't rooted out, these things will continue in terms of what we call distractions. The mind moves according to the conception, and the conceptions are strong, and the mind is naturally attached to those conceptions, so it moves. This is evam manaha karma vasham prayukte. These fruitive mentality, the fruitive tendencies, conceptions, they have conquered over the mind. Karma vasham. Vasha means to conquer or influence strongly. And because they have covered the mind like that, avidyaya, everything is dark. And so he says the way to resolve that, to free the mind of those conceptions and the darkness, pritirna yavat maya vasuda, unless one engages in loving devotional service. He says, Deha yogena tavat. One will not be freed of another body or being bound to the bodily conception. Deha yoga is being bound to bodily conception. Try what one wants to. It will come out somewhere. It will exist. Even if one tries very nicely to hide it or guise it, whatever they do it will still be there. Because the only way of getting rid of it either has not been applied or not been applied sufficiently. Mm-hmm.
How does one get over the conception that he's a significant, important, or great person?
How do we get rid of? I'm sorry. How to get rid of it?
This misconception.
Oh, I could say, if I find success, I'll let you know. Um, but speaking out of realization, then every living entity in this world is the world is moving because every living entity thinks of himself or herself as significant, very significant. And that is what is impelling the person to doing something or saying something. The only, nowadays I've been reading this verse again and again, so perhaps I'm answering from this side. In Prabodhananda Saraswati, when he wrote Chaitanya Chandramrita, there's one verse that Prabhupada quotes often. He says, Yat karunya kataksha vaibhavatam Sri Gauram, that unless there is mercy of Lord Chaitanya, karunya kataksha. Kataksha means merciful glance of Lord Chaitanya. These things will not go. And he gives what happens when a person receives or is showered by Lord Chaitanya's mercy. It's also connected to this purport. That he says, Kaivalyam narakayate. The desire that I'm significant, that I've become God. I'm very significant. Kaivalyam narakayate feels like hellish. Tridashapura akasha pushpayate. One gives up the fantasy of becoming a demigod and living in those powerful positions, etc. And he says, Vidhi Mahendradi, Vidhi Mahendradi Kitayate. They're all insignificant. Kita is worm or insect. Even Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, they're very insignificant. One comes to that. So if they're insignificant and they're considered the greatest personalities in existence in the universe, so who am I? But for that we need a particular asset, an opulence, Vaibhavavatam. Vaibhava is opulence. And that opulence that we need to understand our insignificance is Karunya Kataksha, the merciful glance of Lord Chaitanya. Until that, everyone is significant. I am so significant. The world, if not the world, some influence, some sphere of influence moves because of me. My family, my friends, my community, my country, whatever is that sphere of influence, the significance is that I influence it in some way, that I can do something there. Okay. Someone else had their hand up. I forget who. Okay. Thank you very, very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Gaura Premanande. Hari Hari Bol. You want a reference to that verse? Yeah, it's Chaitanya Chandramrita. I'll share it. I can tell you where it is quoted. It is in the. It's quoted many times in the ninth canto.